Kiersey and I were born identical. From birth, people confused us. We dressed alike, styled our hair the same, we even had that twin stereotype, secret language. When puberty hit and we got to high school, we simply fell out of sync. We were still identical, of course. It's just that Kiersey wanted to try and I just didn't. I wasn't depressed, I wasn't even unhappy, it's just that she was so happy. It showed. It reflected in everything. She knew everyone and was genuinely friends with them. She dressed well, took detailed care of her waist-length hair, had a skincare routine that kept her looking like a freshly picked peach. She had a boyfriend. We had the same face. I had no trouble getting boys to look at me, but they didn't look at me the way Adam looked at her. In saying all this, I can recognize how jealous I may sound, but rest assured that simply isn't the case. I looked up to Kiersey as we grew up. I cut my hair short and dressed casually for ease because I was lazy, but I admired her ability to do it all and make it look so effortless. I wasn't even jealous of her relationship. I was happy to know someone looked at her like I did, like the sun shone from her very pores. Admiration simply wasn't enough. I wanted to do more for myself, instead of just watching it happen. Kiersey was so happy when I asked for her help. She, too, wanted us to be true twins again. To confuse people who didn't know us, to be each other's mirror. She took me to the store immediately and we got started. I learned her skincare routine and we did it together every night, laughing about the day's events over the double bathroom sink. I let my hair grow out, and she got hers cut a bit shorter. In almost no time, we were back where we were as kids, identical in every way, walking arm in arm. The accident was devastating. Brake failure. Her car wrapped around a tree. You don't truly understand mortality until you see your own face in a casket. The funeral home did the best they could, but you could tell where they had to reconstruct our face, where it had smashed into the steering wheel, where the tree had bashed our skull in. What was harder was seeing my name on the tombstone, in the obituaries. My accomplishments listed and celebrated as something of the past. I almost regretted switching our license, asking her to take my car for the night. But as I look up into Adam's eyes, bury myself in his warm chest, as he tells me how sorry he is, it's completely worth it. I have OCD. It's a horrible disorder that seeps into every part of my life. You see, everyone with OCD has different obsessions. Some pick at their face, others can't go outside out of fear of getting injured. For me, I'm a germaphobe. I have to make sure that both my body and the surfaces I touch are purely clean, spotless. When I got engaged to the man I loved, I warned him about my OCD, and he said that he loved me too much to let it get between us. However, a few months into our engagement, I started getting this recurring worry that he was cheating on me. It occupied my mind constantly, and it started to make me insecure about my relationship. I told this to my therapist, who explained that it can be attributed to my OCD, and that it's just another intrusive thought. I brushed it off, though it was still in the back of my mind. One day, I got home from work early, thinking I would surprise my fiancé with a nice dinner. I saw that his car was already in the driveway. This was strange, as he hadn't told me he'd be getting off early. I walked into the house and into our bedroom to change. That's when I saw him, my fiancé, in bed with his work friend of 2 years. It wasn't my OCD that told me my fiancé was cheating on me, but it did help in making sure the house was spotless when the police came to question me after his disappearance. Caleb looked towards the shining summer sky. His soul felt free from the burdens of monotonous work and the hellscape that was his sex life. He just gazed upon the beautiful sky, not thinking, nor making a peep in fear of taking himself out of his intense gaze. The stars pulsate and throb in a sort of beat or pattern that Caleb followed with the tap of his feet. The next day at work he found himself remembering the lovely sky that was above him the night before. He could vividly remember the stars and how they almost felt alive. He strangely felt more confident and approached a coworker he had eyed with love for a while now and asked to go out for coffee. Once work had ended, they walked towards the coffee shop, excited for a late-night cup of joe. They observed that many people also gazed at the sky, smiling with a smile that looked truly complete. They discussed work, funny stories, and how great the weather had been. He offered to walk her home and they agreed to a second date once they arrived. Caleb felt amazed and super ecstatic that he had gained the confidence to finally ask her out and that somehow it went well. He walked home and admired how overjoyed everyone was. He could feel the mood of the city beam and he felt weightless. He arrived at his humble home before gazing towards the sky. He began to float and was being pulled upwards towards the night. But he felt calm. No fear or anxiety. He was suddenly embodied in a circular sphere and he bounced around inside it. He shone brightly and failed to notice the sphere collapsing in on him. The bubble suffocated his body and suddenly pulsated and throbbed. His eyes slowly collapsed back into his skull and his large smile, full of glistening teeth, began to crack and his jaw lodged back into his body. Tears forced themselves out of his indented sockets and his body contorted into a mushed mass. He felt the heat surround him and he suddenly realized he was a star. He remembered the rhythm he tapped his foot to the other day. 1 pulse a second. Eventually, after 30 minutes, he noticed the sphere stopped closing in and he slowly felt his fear rise and pain return. He screamed, noticing many other people in the exact situation, and soon screams radiated from the air. No one heard these calls for help and soon he and many more people, some he recognized as viewers from earlier, yelled in unison. The heat slowly burned his body and he felt like a panini in a panini maker. After an hour of straight hell, the ball surrounding these poor people popped. They fell and slowly turned to ash as they burned through the atmosphere. Back on the surface, a mother and little girl walked among the streets. The girl, who looked to be about 6, pointed and exclaimed, "Look, snow!" before sticking out her hands and watching as bits of light gray specks landed upon them.